Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Punch, Kick, Choke, Chat. My name is Sean Benson. I'm one of your hosts, and I'm here with Sensei Jean Kanokogi, who's also goes by Doctor. So if you hear us flipping back and forth, but because this is a martial arts show, we will tend to call her Sensei. And Sensei, I just want to jump right in with something that we were talking about just before we started, which is you recently traveled to the Kodokan. But one thing that we weren't talking about before the show, and that I think I'm reading this correctly, you did that with your dad, who is of samurai lineage. Just break that wide open because that's very exciting for us here on the show.
Absolutely. Well, it's so interesting to be of samurai lineage. My father was born in Yatsushiro City in Kumamoto, which is on the island of Kyushu, all the way the most southern island of Japan. Down in Kumamoto, the samurai Jakushin Kanokogi was in charge of the Kumamoto land. Now, Jakushin Kanokogi, I can't recall the dates. I'm thinking it was 14 something or 15 something, somewhere in that time. He had the castle, which is now Kumamoto Castle. It was originally called Kanokogi Castle. So, coming from that lineage, we went back to visit my father's friends. He had a class reunion that he hasn't seen people in 80 years or 70 years. But also what's very special is my mom, who passed in 2009, her ashes were invited to be in the samurai gravesite in the Ankokoji Cemetery because the Japanese government recognizes her as an American samurai because all she did to bridge the gap for their national sport of judo. So her ashes are interred in in the Kanokogi family samurai gravesite.
Wow.
Amazing.
Yes.
Yeah, that's significant. First off, I'm sorry about your mom passing. And
Thank you.
I have two questions to follow up on what you just said. The first is, what does it mean to you? Because we talk about samurai and Bushido and warrior and all that kind of thing. What does that mean to you? Any of those words, or, how much of that concept do you want to break open for us as you perceive it, being in a direct lineage?
Well, I was brought up with just about the code of Bushido, which is overall overarching, not getting into every code, being a good person, doing something not with yourself in mind. Don't take things personally, especially when there's adversity coming at you. Don't let others control or manipulate your mind with their influence of any negativity. So stemming from whether it be wabi sabi, code of Bushido, the judo, the principles of judo, Seireko Zenyo and Jitsu Kyoe, all of that is what I was brought up with, of the samurai lineage. And this, I should caveat that and say that my dad is Japanese, but my mother is an American woman of Russian and German descent. And she's the first American woman invited to be interred in a samurai gravesite for the work that she's done. So I just wanted to put that out there as well. So being brought up with all of that code is the way I've lived my life throughout my career of law enforcement, now my career after law enforcement as a speaker. So that's exactly how the influence of martial arts, the code of Bushido, the samurai lineage, all of that has influenced me. But I also wanted to add, when I went to the castle, which was the Kanokogi Castle, I tried to reclaim being a princess of the castle, and it didn't work too well. I told everybody, get out of my house, and they asked me for my ticket of admission. So that didn't work too well.
Was there any special consideration? I mean, or was it very much, a tourist feel?
Very much a tourist feel, but I felt a very big connection. I didn't, as Japanese people, a lot of times we just don't want to call attention. Like, hey, this is my castle, everybody out. I mean, yes, I'm joking about it and everything, but I would never do that with it and challenge the ways of what the Japanese government does to the upkeep, and especially they're helping with the restoration after the earthquake. One other really, really cool things about my trip to Japan within the last month, we went and hiked up to the Rinaldo's Cave. I don't know if anybody's familiar with Rinaldo's Cave. That's where Miyamoto Musashi wrote the Book of Five Rings. The cave has a gigantic rock. And at the end of Musashi's life, after he has won 60 battles, which is almost unheard of, he asked the Kanokogi clan if he can go in their cave and write the Book of Five Rings. So it was written in my family's cave. He sat there, he wrote the book. We went and we hiked up through a bamboo forest, up these rocks and down this hill. And we had to pass like 500 little Buddha statues, all giving you the Mona Lisa look. It was definitely not something that this New Yorker was used to. And when we got there, what was so moving, it was so spiritual. You go and you just meditate in that cave right by that rock. If you close your eyes, you can feel the ancestry. You can feel the power. You can harness something that's so not tangible. And if you open your mind and open your soul and truly, truly meditate, you can even connect with some of those that have passed. So as I'm doing this, as I'm really taking in everything, the spirituality, knowing that Musashi was there writing the Book of Five Rings, and then I turn to my right, and what do I see but a stone? And the stone had some inscription. And of course, curiosity of me gets my Google Translate out. I aim it at the stone, and I almost fell down. I saw my name. I saw the name Kanokogi, because it was attributed to that's whose cave he was writing the book in. So this was just so magical, and I've never experienced that before.
Incredible.
So being connected to the samurai lineage was just so overwhelmingly empowering and moving. And what I'm doing with that is, as I'm processing that, I'm thinking, how can I take this experience and incorporate it into my empowerment speaking, into my resilient speaking, and share this with the world, and share this with my judo students, and share this with everybody, because everybody needs a piece of this. It's just totally a feel-good and empowering experience.
That's incredible. And before we go back to your mother, I just think it's incredible also that she isn't of that lineage, but was welcomed back in that way. Sensei Suino, I see you really kind of connecting and having lived there. And also we talked about Bushido in the very first interview we did on the show with you, because it's an idea that you talk about very overtly and strongly. So I just want to ask what you're connecting with here. And also, I think you have an ability to understand maybe the significance of this in a way that those of us who haven't lived in Japan maybe don't.
Man, what a story. I mean, that's absolutely amazing. I mean, just being able to go to one of those castles and spend time being super quiet. I definitely have felt something of what you talk about, but your family connection there just brings it to another level. I was in Tokyo not too long ago and traveled with some of my students to the gravesite of my jujitsu and judo teacher. And you know, I trained with him for 4 years in Japan, and then, you know, visited him many times afterwards. And I was unprepared for the amount of power of that experience. I thought it would be kind of an academic experience, but it was really powerful. And as I said, maybe I get a little bit of what you're talking about with the direct family connection. That's an amazing story.
Mm-hmm. The word wabi-sabi, you mentioned that, and that's a word that hasn't come up on our show yet. I have a vintage sports car, and the only decal I have on it, everything else is completely stock, says wabi-sabi, and I had it custom made. So talk to us about that concept and why it's important in samurai and bushido.
It's important overall in life, not just samurai and bushido. It incorporates finding your purpose. It incorporates ways to be a good person. It incorporates kintsugi, which is when the bowl is broken and it comes back together, and you're stronger where the gold inlay is. So it really incorporates a lot of principles that we can follow in life and dealing with adversity. It really is a substrate to resilience, understanding and delving into that a little bit, and finding your purpose, finding what are you good at, what does the world need, what can you make some money doing, and what do you love. Incorporate that all together and find your purpose, because if you don't have your purpose, how are you going to get out of bed in the morning? If you don't have a purpose, and your purpose doesn't have to be this grand, okay, I'm going to do this and that's my only purpose. You can have so many little purposes all day. I don't know, is purposes a word or is it purpose I? But
We're
really,
real purpose tonight. You're the
so
doctor. You get to tell us.
I get to make up the words, say it with conviction, and then convince
Yes,
everybody that it's
yeah.
right. So I mean, we could have so many little purposes, cooking a good meal, going out and finding the right fruit and vegetable that you want to create the meal. A lot of time, nourishment is also purpose. So doing something or going and helping somebody. The other thing is doing random acts of kindness. That's all under that same umbrella. Because in the Japanese culture, that they are probably some of the most kindest people I've ever met in my life. Case in point, and Sensei Sueno, I'm sure you can attest to this. If you ask somebody for help, they will go out of their way and take you to where you want to go. To a point where you're just trying to strike small talk conversation, saying, "Hey, I like tea. Oh, let me take you to the tea store." No, no, no. I'm just talking about tea. In our American way, it's small talk, but to them, they just want to help you. They just want to bring you. They just want to show you. So that's really the umbrella of wabi sabi.
Love that. Yeah, well, tell me if I'm wrong about the way my fiance and I think about it. And she's actually reading a book right now called Ikigai about finding her purpose. But the idea that there really is that perfection in imperfection. And that's where the fulfillment can come, is accepting the imperfection and living fully within that. Do we have that wrong? Is that accurate?
That's very accurate. Except not only, the Japanese, they highlight the imperfection, they embrace the imperfection. You break the bowl on the floor, instead of throwing it in the garbage and discarding it, you sit there and meticulously put it back together with this gold inlay, this gold strong glue bond, gold speckles, actual real gold. And as you put it back together, that's where the scars are of the bowl. That's where it's actually stronger because it's impenetrable at this point. So they cherish it. It's revered. So if you have scars, if you have a level of imperfection, you are not discarded. And taking that and thinking as a person, you have scars. You're not perfect. You shouldn't be discarded. You should be embraced to what you do bring. And one of the things that I saw in southern Japan in Kumamoto, my dad's friend has all of these homes for people who are mentally and physically challenged, people who are aging and alone, and all of these homes, because they take care of their people. They take care of the people who are, for better terms, the ones that other societies would see as broken. These people aren't broken. These people are revered. These people are highlighted and embraced to see. Matter of fact, I just read an article that in Tokyo, there's a cafe, and I think it's called Wrong Order Cafe. They take Alzheimer's patients or patients with dementia, and they hire them for 2 hours a day to be waiters and waitresses. And you can order a hamburger, and you'll come back and get some gyoza, because guaranteed you'll get something. So don't expect whatever you order. Don't expect what it to be. However, they laugh, they have a good time, and part of the fun is whatever you order, you're not going to get it. However, you're empowering these patients instead of sitting looking at a wall, being sad. They're out and about in this cafe, working as servers, and realizing, okay, I got it wrong, but you know what? You still got food. Eat it.
Well, before we get to our intros, I want to put a little button on that, which is, there's this idea, everybody's got a plan till you get punched in the face. And that's one way to accept surrender to chaos. And I love that the other is actually helping people who have an affliction of Alzheimer's, and you learn how to surrender through not knowing what your meal will be, because we can get so entitled even just about our coffee order. And the idea that you just accept what comes, but it's a conscious choice and it's a practice. That's really beautiful. I really like that. Thanks for the opening to this chat, Sensei Kanokogi. Ladies and gentlemen, like I mentioned, my name is Sean Benson. If you're watching on YouTube or YouTube Live, hit that subscribe, smash the like button, share with your friends. If you're listening on the podcast, really excited you're with us and you're listening to us a little later. But if you're here on Zoom in real time, we're so happy you're here because you get to be a part of this living history. And look where we're going already, and you can ask your questions. So there's a chat button at the bottom of the screen that's going to be highlighted, and we want you to chip in. And if your questions aren't aren't absolutely ratchet, we might ask them of our guest. But we're really happy you're here, even if your questions aren't great. I'm here with my senseis, who are my co-hosts, Sensei Randy Dauphin, Sensei Nicolas Suino, and Hanshi Gary Legacy. And I don't mean to exclude you with this, Sensei Suino, but I want to say how excited I am in that we have a grading this weekend, and in Legacy, Shore, and Ruth, there will be 5 new black belts from each of our clubs, me, Sensei Dauphin, and Hanshi Legacy. And I just want to say how exciting that is and how much I look forward to seeing them over the weekend. Sensei Dauphin, what's going on?
Well, Sensei Suino will be there when those ranks are conferred. Sensei Kanokogi, I'm sorry if I pronounce your name incorrectly, so please just correct me or scold me, whatever you need to do. I apologize already. So Sensei Kanokogi is a 6th degree black belt in Judo, and I already know from the conversation, I read this, but I know it's true already. She's a highly respected sensei. She's been on the U.S. national team in Judo, and she's medaled internationally in many tournaments. This is one of the things I really like, because I have daughters and I have a wife. She was one of the original signers of the American Civil Liberty Union Suite, which fought for women's rights in the sport of Judo. Thank you so much for doing that. Thank you for doing that. I'm very grateful. She's a senior special agent for the U.S. government with extensive experience in conducting criminal investigations. And that's another thing. I just had a federal agent in here, FTA agent, and yeah, thank you for your service. 23 years, as far as I read it, 23 years in law enforcement, which maybe it's more today. Maybe I read it wrong, but thank you so much for your service. I'm a respecter of education. Says Suino has a high degree. Benson has some type of a degree. I'm not sure what it is, but I think it's in science. But you yourself, you hold a BS and a master's from John Jay College of Criminal Justice, and also doctor, right? We talked about it, a Ph.D. in the study of psychology in 2018. So not recent, like a long time ago, 2018, you got your PhD. You've also been published in the interrogation of experience of the transition novices from beginner to expertise. Right. I think I said that right. In your off time, you volunteer for a Federal Law Enforcement Officers Association, where you direct mental health and peer support services and work daily to bridge the gap between the law enforcement and mental wellness. So thank you for that. I always like to provide a couple of thoughts. I have daughters and a wife who are in martial arts. And I think about your mom and you and the work you've done for females to be in martial arts. I just want to thank you for that. And I'm really excited to hear where the conversation goes tonight. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Sensei Dauphin. So back to you, Sensei Kanokogi. The way we like to start each show after we do our intros is with pretty much the same question for each guest, which I love asking. What was it like for you growing up, and what brought you into your first martial arts environment?
Wow. So this is a great story. Growing up, I had a mother who was a sensei and a father who was a sensei. I don't know if you guys remember, many years ago, there was a commercial, Kanokogi versus Samsonite. And the karate guy came out and did karate on Samsonite luggage. Now, you all being martial arts artists, I'm sure that would ring a bell if you remember it. So he would come out and beat the daylights out of luggage. So that's my dad. My
I
mom,
absolutely
okay,
remember that commercial.
and then my mom, of course, being a sensei. So growing up, I should digress. I was just about born on the mat. And I'm not kidding. This is a real story. My mom was teaching her judo class. Coincidentally, my father was teaching class somewhere else. So she's teaching her class, but her gynecologist was one of her students, and he was testing for his black belt. He was preparing his kata for his black belt, but she was still in the middle of teaching class. So she was doing uchikomi and pregnant with me, 9 months pregnant with me, and doing uchikomi, which is the free form, not completing a throw, but still full contact. And her water broke on the mat. So she looked at him and she said, well, I guess it's time. And he, being her doctor, said, well, you know what? Since we're right down the block from the hospital, let's just go there. So they go to the hospital. And so I wasn't actually coming out on the mat. Go to the hospital. And back then, this is late 60s, early 70s. And she's in her gown. And you typically will see women who are giving birth in the hospital, laying in the bed, the doctor in their white jacket, next to them, comforting them. No, this wasn't the case. She had on her gown. The doctor was in his white jacket. However, he was practicing the kata techniques on her and lifting her and coming in on the techniques. And at one point, he came in incorrectly. So she choked him just to let him know that he didn't bend his knees. And could you imagine walking past a potential delivery area and seeing the doctor and the woman who's about to give birth involved in some sort of who knows what? Because judo obviously wasn't very popular at that point. And then finally, I decided, all right, it's time, I'm coming out. So I came out into this world in the middle of somebody practicing for their kata exam, my mother choking the doctor, and doing uchikomi. So that is my start to coming into martial arts. Then, of course, being that they're both judo instructors, as I'm growing up, of course, I hear everything, I see everything. And probably before I could even walk, I was at the dojo because they both had to teach. And I was crawling around the mat. As I started getting a little bit older and able to stand, then, well, what does a kid do when they stand? They fall. So why not teach me a break fall at 5 years old instead of fall on my butt and cry like every other normal child? No, I had to learn a break fall. How to learn not to hit my head. So here I am standing. And also, what does a child do? A child emulates every adult they see, whether it be a word that they hear. And boy, did I have some great language. But whether it be a word or whether it be a technique. And now my parents are seeing me on the side of the mat at 6 years old doing the warm-up and doing standalone foot sweeps and doing the shadow uchikomi. And they see that I'm just picking this up and I'm picking this up. So now it's time to get me a gi. So around 6 or 7 years old, they found a gi, they fit me in a gi, and there I was in judo class with everybody else. It was not just judo class, it was judo family. Everybody on that mat was my brother, was my sister. And unbeknownst to me, I grew up learning different languages, people from all walks of life. We had Haitian, Jamaican, people from Barbados, people from different countries in Africa, different people from South America. And we would have these people visiting when I was a kid. And this is growing up in a melting pot in our little dojo in Brooklyn. So I learned different languages, different cultures. And to me, as a kid, I knew nothing of what it was to be racist, what it was to be biased, what it was to be different. Because to me, everybody was the same. And that's how I was raised on the judo mat with my judo brothers and sisters.
That is incredible. We've heard that story over and over on the show of just people finding that this is the place where none of that exists. And that's
Yes.
why many people have stayed. Also, I think we've done 120 episodes. I think 88 of our guests were born on the mats. So you're our 89th. I'm kidding. That's never happened. That's insane. What an incredible start to a martial arts life. Now, I think this is a good time, unless I'm wrong, because I know this book deals a fair bit with your mother, but talk to us about the book you've got coming out, Get Up and Fight, or that is out, and tell us about that, and tell us about how that relates to your mother, and tell us a bit about who your parents are that way.
Sure. Get Up and Fight is actually it's a book that my mom and I started writing together back, gosh, in about 2005. So she would write some, I would write some, and it was her life story. She wanted her life story told, and she wanted it told in her voice. Uh, and I'd say at that point, she would call me and say, okay, I emailed you some stuff that I wrote, clean it up, add to it. And I said, wait, let me stop you right there. I am federal law enforcement. Is there anything in here that has not passed the statute of limitations for an arrest? Because I'm not going to come and arrest you, okay? So we would go back and forth, and then she would send me chapters, and she didn't quite understand the concept of email, so she would email me stuff, and as soon as she hit the send button, she'd call me, did you read it? I would be out on a surveillance and be like, I can't read it, I'm doing surveillance. Well, tell everybody to wait, you need to read this, and write it back up. So we would go back and forth. Then I'd sit in the house and we would just start writing. I would tell her to talk, just talk, and I would just scribe and talk, and then we would make it into a story. The story Get Up and Fight is really Rusty's childhood, of how an ordinary person from a childhood went and did extraordinary things as an adult. Rusty, and I say ordinary person because she grew up rough and tumble in Coney Island. She grew up with parents that were, one was addicted to drugs, one was an alcoholic. They always fought. She had a broken home. Her babysitters were unfortunately, they used to call them like the vaudeville acts, Milo the Mule-Faced Boy and the Pinhead Sisters. And that's where she started developing her values, saying, you know what, you don't judge a book by the cover, you judge people on how they treat you. So she hung out with them. She was a survivor. Her name is actually Rena, but they called her Rusty, and people thought, oh, they're calling her Rusty because of her red hair. No, that wasn't the case. They called her Rusty because Rusty was a stray dog in Coney Island, and Rusty was a survivor. So my mother, Rusty, was a survivor. And as a child who had to fend for herself, had a lot of adversity, and some of it included assault, and how to survive that level of assault, and how to thrive after being assaulted. She also was in a girl gang. She was the leader of a girl gang, and not gangs like you and I know it today, where they shoot each other and do all sorts of horrible things. It was a fist fight, a corner street fist fight brawl in Brooklyn. So she was a leader of a girl gang, and then she realized, you know what, this isn't the life for me. I'm going to get a job. She gets a job working for AT&T, and she wants to get out of that life of the girl gang because it was getting dangerous. And she was also arrested, and that kind of set her straight also. But she figured after she gets a job, she met a man, and he was very sweet with her. Unfortunately, he was very much like her father, because a lot of girls tend to go and gravitate towards women or towards men like their dad. And her dad was not very good. He was an alcoholic. He was a gambler. And she learned the hard way. So to try to make the marriage work, she insisted that he went to AA for help, and she went to Al-Anon so that she can support him. She said, okay, we're going to make this marriage work. He was very violent towards her, and it was just horrific. So again, I say ordinary person because unfortunately, this is the life that people get bits and pieces of in their world. She goes to Al-Anon and she meets a friend, and Rusty used to like to exercise. She had a lot of energy. So when she was exercising and working out, she saw this big burly guy, and she said, hey, you look like you work out. What do you do? And he was in Al-Anon. He said, well, I lift some weights and I do judo. And she asked him, well, what the heck is judo? Now, this was back in probably 1955. So he said, well, it's a Japanese martial art. And she said to him, well, why in the heck would you want to learn anything Japanese, given it was 1955? What just happened? Okay. So he said, well, let me show you. and he comes in on a hip throw and he picks her up. Now, Rusty was 5'11", 230 pounds. I mean, just a big, strong cinder block. He comes in on a hip throw and picks her up like she was a piece of paper. She said, "That's it. I forgive Japan for everything. I need to learn what this judo is." So he says, "Okay, well, I go to the YMCA for judo lessons. Why don't you come with me? Or why don't you meet me there?" And she said, "Fine." She goes back home. She's telling her mom at this point, "Hey, I'm going to take some judo lessons and I'll be back." So her mom, nobody understood. So her mom's telling everybody, "Well, where's Rusty?" "Oh, she went out with Judy." So uh, um, not understanding, she shows up at the Y. The instructor said, "No, sorry, no women are allowed."
Wow.
Not at all. No women allowed. And again, 1955, this is unheard of, women wanting to do full contact martial arts. Finally, she kept on insisting and persisting, just like an ordinary person would do who was hungry to do something. And finally, he led her on the mat and he said, "Well, you need to go and change in that broom closet over there," because it was a YMCA and there were no women's facilities. So he wouldn't even let her wear a belt. He made her wear a rope. He wouldn't let her wear a gi. He made her wear sweatpants and navy fatigues. But she kept on showing up. She craved to learn this martial art. Finally, they accepted her because she paid her dues. She took the hard knocks, the hard licks, and everybody throwing her and her getting stronger and getting back up and always getting up and fighting. That's another way I was able to name the book "Get Up and Fight." Finally, they went to a tournament in 1959, and she took her gi. She subsequently got a gi. She took her gi so that she can go and do the warm-ups with her teammates, just to support her teammates. Well, she's doing uchikomi, which is the free form practice. You grab the gi and you just execute the throw, but you don't finish it. So doing that warm up, getting the warm up of the bodies, and then she hears a crack on the other side of the mat and a scream. It was one of her teammates. He was injured. The coach came up. The instructor who said no women allowed a couple of years prior said, "Rusty, I'm putting you in. Don't call attention to yourself. Do not do anything besides get a draw." So she said, "Fine." And to further disguise herself, she had short hair. She was very big and strong, but she took an ace bandage and wrapped it around her chest just to really be androgynous looking. So
Uh-huh.
she didn't call attention to herself. She literally was disguised as a man. Well, she goes and she does the grip, and in judo there's grip fighting, so they do grip fighting. She felt like it was a street fight, so it became a street fight. And this guy, she was the only one standing in between the gold medal match for the team. So if she pulled a draw, then the next guy could fight for the medal. If she lost, then that was it. In her head, she didn't know if it was in her head or if it was her teammates yelling, "Go Rusty." She
Okay.
finally came in on a throw, and she threw this guy for a full point, and
Oh,
she won. So now she's like, "Oh my gosh, I won. Gosh, crap, I won." So she's lined up with her team. They're all getting a gold medal for winning. And, she's getting this medal and she's thinking, "I can't believe I'm finally getting a medal for fighting instead of a citation or instead of getting arrested. This is great." As she's leaving, she's holding on to that gold medal and she's just so proud of herself. The tournament director comes up to her and says, excuse me, are you a girl?" And he says it in such an accusatory manner. And she said, "No, I'm a woman." He said, "Well, no women can compete. There's no girls allowed." And she's like, "Are you kidding me?" He's like, "Well, if you don't give us that medal back, your whole team will forfeit." So
Wow.
now she has to make a decision. Does she keep the medal and tell this guy where to go and how to get there? Or does she do the right thing for the greater good of the team? And with every bit of strength, she took that medal off from around her neck and she handed it to the tournament director. It took more strength and more intestinal fortitude not to take that medal and shove it down his throat,
Sure.
because that was just so unfair. And that right there was her ikigai. That right there was her turning point, because she felt at that point she did everything for being a woman. She felt at that point that no woman is ever going to suffer such an indignity ever again. Not on my watch. I don't know how, I don't know where, but this will never, ever, ever happen again. And I will make a point of it. So she didn't know what she was going to do. She figured it out. She took every penny she had. She begged, borrowed, and stole to get a ticket to go to the Kodokan and train in Japan and learn judo at the Mecca, at the beginning of where it was invented, so she can learn it and take it back to America and teach everybody the right way. So in 1962, she gets to the Kodokan, and they put her on the women's side of the Kodokan, the women's dojo. The women's dojo was only allowed to practice kata, which is the form practice. It was not the combative judo. So the kata, although very beautiful, and Rusty learned amazing kata from even Keiko Fukuda, she was there, and that she's the mother of kata. So she really learned her kata very, very well. Unfortunately, she wanted the combative side, and she just insisted and insisted to be on the men's side of the dojo. And they finally let her in, and boy, did she embody that mantra: fall down 7, get up 8, because she was thrown and she was thrown, but she kept on getting up. And eventually they became, they welcomed her. They saw her fighting spirit. They didn't see that she was an American redheaded woman running around Japan and who is this crazy woman? They saw her as another judoka at the Kodokan. They embraced her. She made some friends. She made some really, really good friends. And matter of fact, one of her friends went home during break, and his father said, "Oh, do you see that woman at the Kodokan? She's on the news." He said, "Oh, yeah, that's my friend." And well, he said, "You know, I have to tell you, son, you should marry her. She'll give you big, strong babies." So needless to say, I call him Dad.
That is amazing. You know, sometimes when people tell a real long story about someone else, we want to chip in and say, you know, we want you to remember this show's about you, but this is very much your story, isn't it? I mean, this is very much like I have a very strong relationship with my mom and her journey, and this is very much your story, and you can't really tell yours without telling that, can you?
That's true, because without telling that, where am I? How did I get born? And you know, with this book, Get Up and Fight, I wrote it in a very difficult way because I wrote it after she passed. And I wrote it knowing that there was a pandemic. People were sad. People needed hope. People needed something. Wrote this book in her voice. It's not easy to capture writing something in her voice, telling her story. I made her 3 promises. I will finish my Ph.D. I will look after my dad, and I will get this story out. And I asked her, I said, "Mom, do you want me to change anything? Because some stuff is really harsh." She said, "No, you can't change anything, because if you change any parts of that history, any parts of the misogyny, any parts of the backhandedness that went behind her back to try to obstruct her, well, you know what? History has a nasty way of repeating itself if you don't tell the truth." So I kept everything in there, the first iteration. I'm working now on slimming the book down because it's like a 500-page monster. So I'm cutting it in half, but there's a lot of pictures in it. Billie Jean King wrote the foreword for the book. So,
Amazing.
Yep.
Legend.
So that's the beginning of my story.
That's great. Let me ask you just real quick, where just for the people listening, where can they go get that book right now?
Right now, you can get the Kindle version on Amazon, but the actual hard copy book, which is it's great as a weapon or a workout tool, also because it's so big. You can get it at www.drjean007.com.
Great.
So it's DRJEAN007.com, and you can get it there. We've got these shirts too. It's Rusty doing an actual throw. It's Rusty doing her Haragoshi, and we had an artist render it, and we made shirts of it.
That's fantastic. Question for you that we're going to go around the horn on, so we can all get some thoughts out here. You know, you talked about her having that girl gang life, that tough life, that wrong direction life, And everyone on this call can relate, and we'll go around the horn on it. But I want to start with you, Sensei Kanokogi. Why do you think the martial arts is where so many people who have that story turn? Why has it literally saved so many people's lives? And not because of the fights they went on to win, but the fights they went on to not have in that different environment.
Because you get a sense of self. You get a sense of family. A lot of times people fight out of anger, out of boredom, out of wanting to lash out. In our dojo, I've had people tell me that my parents were the only people that actually cared about them in their life. They had a sense of family. They put down their weapons. They put down anything else they were doing, and they found peace, discipline, and an outlet for the physical activity. So that's what I believe.
Thanks. Sensei Dauphin, where do you go with this? You know, having had a little bit of a street background, why do so many people turn to the martial arts and find something else there that saves them, maybe? If that's not too strong a word.
I think it's because you know yourself and you're insecure, and you turn to the martial arts to help you with something that you don't have an answer for. Right. That's what I think it's about. For me, that's what it is about, right? Like, you do some stuff and you're like, I'm not tough. I'm not secure. I'm insecure. Where can I go to help with that? It's martial arts. And then when you find a good teacher, then that helps you with all that.
Thanks, Sensei. Before I go to Sensei Suino and Hanshi Legacy, I just want to chip in on my own. My real darkness came later when I already knew martial arts to some extent. And for me, the answer is that I already knew what a good life could look like. And so I actually, when things got bad, I had a bit of a like periscope up that could still see good because of the martial arts. So it was a little flipped order for me. Sensei Suino, you had a pretty rough and tumble upbringing. Why do so many people end up turning to this and finding some version of a salvation or a better life who come from that?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly don't think it's intellectual. I don't think I was walking around at 8 years old going, gosh, I'm really insecure. I better go get some martial arts. You know, my parents put me in it because I was a little kid with a big mouth, and they said he's going to get his ass beat every day if he doesn't do something about this. But then when I got there, you know, it's just that falling in love with it thing. I mean, the first day I knew this was something I was going to do forever. And why do you do that? Right? Because somehow it resonates with you. You have this powerful realization that there are people who can do really cool stuff. They're going to support you in doing that. Yeah, I mean, all that stuff, you know, the family stuff, it comes. But I think it's on a deeper level when, you know, your first day, I don't know, you know, I didn't grow up in the dojo, but I was there when I was 8 years old, and you can sense it. Somehow you have this innate intelligence, and you can sense that this is going to be a cure, or at least a solution for part of what you feel ails you, even if it's not a conscious awareness of that thing.
Right on. Hanshi Legacy, you know, just talking about her mom, a girl gang, finding something better in martial arts. I know you might be able to relate. Why do so many people find something different and better in the arts?
Well, because karate is a way of life, or martial arts is a way of life, and it has many doors. You can go from being a druggie to an intellect and walk in one of those doors, and then it will take you through all sorts of different ways of life. It all leads to betterment, no matter what door that you enter. You know what I mean? If an intellect goes in and they're not a good fighter, or they're not good physically, maybe even not well, it can also help your body heal, as well as being a person like myself, who was not an intellect and was walked off of the street. It sort of made me a bit wiser, picked me up, put me on my feet, put me in the right direction. So I think martial arts, Richard Kim once said to me, Legacy, what is martial arts? I just stood there with a blank face, and he says, it's the way of life, the art of life. So that's what a lot of people don't see. We're just introduced in movies on fighting or cutting somebody's head off, but the other parts that it's just as favorable in are not that widely seen.
Thanks, Hanchi. I'm really glad I asked that question of everybody. By the way, before we go on to the next question, I just want to say we have mentioned AA on this show. Everybody knows what Alcoholics Anonymous is. Al-Anon is a program for people whose lives have been affected or hurt by their relationship to an alcoholic. And I just want to say that because it's not as well known a program. And I know at least one person on this show who's gotten life-saving recovery there. So if you have a relationship with an alcoholic that's troubling you, you could seek out an Al-Anon meeting, or you can DM me for more information, because that's real. I love that you brought that program up, and I love that quite literally your path came through the healing that kind of place provides. We have a question from Sensei George Rigo. Yes, to the show, friend of the program. And what he has said is amazing history and story, Kanokogi Sensei. I'm a father and jiu-jitsu sensei to my two daughters, ages 13 and 10. And my youngest has wanted to be in the FBI since she learned about law enforcement. So he has two questions for you. First, as a highly ranked female judo sensei, do you have any particular advice for a father sensei raising daughters in the teen years in the dojo? And secondly, any words of advice for him or his daughter as a female martial artist who desires to pursue federal law enforcement? Thank you for your time and your dedication to Budo. Thanks, Sensei. It's nice to see you on the call.
Wow, those are two really great questions. So as a sensei father to sensei daughters, or to daughters, this is great. When we teach judo, when we teach, and please guys jump in for the other martial arts, there's different body types. Not every technique is executed the same way. It's not cookie cutter. You cannot execute the same throw the same way, the same direction, because the body types are different. Women have a lower center of gravity. So as a father, if you want to teach a judo throw, say something that involves upper body, where you will have to lift somebody a little bit more kazushi, a little bit more twist, let's just say Marote Seonagi, which is a double arm twist, and they go overboard. They go over your shoulder. If your daughters have a lower center of gravity, you may want to teach a foot sweep or an osotogari, a reaping throw, at first to build their confidence, because teaching to the body type is absolutely imperative. And the other thing is, even though physically and biologically men and women are built differently, don't ever accept, oh, I'm a girl, I can't do that. Never, ever, ever, ever accept that when it comes to martial arts. I'm sure there's some things biologically that men and women completely can't do separately. However, when it comes to teaching them, please don't ever accept that, and encourage them. A lot of times people, I notice in the martial arts, speak in the negative. Well, don't do this, don't do that. But if you try to speak in the positive, it's received better. Instead of don't step to your right, well, how about this? It would be better if you step to your left instead of don't step to your right, if that makes sense. That's one great piece of advice that I've had, having a father as a sensei as well. Teaching to the center of gravity, teaching to your strengths in general in life. If you capitalize on the person's strengths and do not focus on what their weaknesses are, they will improve, even in business, by 63% of productivity. So focusing on the strengths. Now, to get into federal law enforcement, very, very simple. Very simple. Go to school. Stay away from any type of nefarious activity. Be honest, and it's almost like live your life with the code of Bushido, and pursue different avenues, learn different interests, fill your life's toolbox with things other than law enforcement. Everybody goes to and studies criminal justice. Everybody studies law. But what about something different? What about some art, some horticulture, something that will diversify your toolbox, and then apply? And if you don't get called the first time, keep applying and keep applying. Go and think about other agencies. There's 96 federal agencies that have federal agents. So go and apply where you want. Think about what you want to do. Think about maybe what your purpose is. There's different avenues to pursue and different facts you can track down to see what you want to do. There's Homeland Security investigations. You could deal with protecting the border. You can deal with drugs. You can deal with, unfortunately, human trafficking interception. There's so much you can do in federal law enforcement. So don't pigeonhole yourself into saying, I just want to do what they're doing on TV, because I can assure you, there is not one crime that I have ever investigated that has been solved within an hour with commercials and an arrest and an adjudication. I assure you that.
That is such wonderful advice. If you remove the idea of federal law enforcement, I think that's just wonderful life advice. Now, I want to ask you something, because this seems like a nice, we're going to get back to more of your linear story, but this seems like a nice segue into the fact that you really like to work with the bridge between mental health, mental wellness, and federal law enforcement. So I want you to talk about that bridge, and I want you to talk about where martial arts fits into that.
Well, martial arts fits into everything in my life. Everything that I do tends to stem from something I've learned in martial arts, whether it be interpersonal relationships, whether it be being fluid in an interrogation, just like you're fluid in a foot sweep, or using a person's body language and strengths as you're interviewing or interrogation or involved in an interrogation. So martial arts has a play with everything. Now, I'm sorry, what was the first part of the question that you had asked, Sean?
Just the idea that you are working to bridge health and wellness between
Yes.
Mental health and federal law enforcement itself.
Unfortunately, there's always been a stigma with mental health, getting mental health help, going back all the way, to the days of the military, where, oh, suck it up, buttercup, you're fine, you can't, don't be sad, I don't care how many traumas you've seen, this is the job you've signed up for. But unfortunately, between the average person sees maybe about 1 to 4 traumas in a lifetime, traumatic incidents, critical incidents. That's the average person in the lifetime span. Law enforcement sees 1 to 2 critical incidents or traumas a day. Multiply that by the days, multiply that by a 20 or 25-year career. You're carrying all of this weight now, whether it be through direct contact, whether it be vicarious trauma, whether it be a critical incident, whatever it is that you're exposed to, you're carrying this. So where does it go? It doesn't go anywhere. You're in a state of hypervigilance and you can't return to homeostasis. So suicide then becomes an epidemic because the pain doesn't stop. The pain is shouldered and burdened. You have supervisors telling you, you are silly for wanting to ask for help. And therefore stigma and shame is affixed to it. What I'm doing is stepping in between and smashing the stigma, removing the shame, normalizing the conversation. And it is okay to not be okay, even temporarily, even if you need to talk things out. And that's why we're working so hard with peer support, building peer support programs. But then there was the issue of confidentiality. Yes, peer support is great. You talk to another cop, you talk to another agent, but then the supervisor used to be able to come and say, hey, what did that guy or girl tell you? And force them to tell you. So I worked on legislation recently that the confidential opportunities for peer support, where it makes it confidential. You have a level of confidentiality now, so you're not pressured to tell a supervisor what was just discussed, besides, of course, the obvious reportable events. So that's what I'm doing to work and smash the stigma and make it okay to not be okay. Just like in martial arts, sometimes you have great days, sometimes you have not so great days. And it's okay to not be okay because you can get up and fight again.
I love everything about this. And I just want to say out loud what I'm hearing before we go to your 10 questions is, we always talk on this show and in general about a martial artist has a responsibility to help those around. And I think a lot of people think that can mean 2 people are fighting and someone's being picked on and you step in and, that's a really cool and thing. But You're literally working at the legislative level to protect people. And I just want to say out loud to people listening, the way you help other people as a martial artist might be stepping in on a conflict, but there might be a bigger picture. And I love, Sensei mentioned in the intro about the ACLU, and to be working at these broad levels where people's lives, without knowing who or why, they just have more privacy. They just have more of an ability to recover. It's a really it's some warrior ass shit without being fisticuffs on a street corner. It's really cool. Time for your 10 questions. The 10 questions is something we ask all our guests. We ask that you answer as impulsively as you can, but expand as needed. What is the most effective move in your martial arts arsenal?
Oh, me?
All you. Nobody else is going to answer these 10 questions. We've all been through them.
The most
You're on the hot plate.
most effective move in my martial arts arsenal is movement.
Who is the most influential martial artist in your life?
Rusty Kanokogi.
Who do you think is the most influential martial artist of all time, and why?
Professor Jigoro Kano. He invented Judo.
What excites you most about the next 5 years of your training?
The endless possibilities, the amount of people that I can help, the amount of people that I can introduce to Judo, and the seniors that I could help as they learn how to fall without breaking things.
Ooh, yep. If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you get there?
Your mother's been waiting for you.
Mine was a very similar answer. Do you have a favorite film or television martial artist, whether they train or not? They might not even be a real martial artist.
Television, does that include MMA, PFL?
No, we're thinking more characters, action, that kind of thing, TV and film. But I want to know your favorite MMA as well after.
I think any of the strong female characters that execute especially in the police shows, that execute a judo throw, become my favorite martial artists of the moment. So of course I'll watch a show and say, wow, that was judo, look at that. Mm-hmm. So any of those female characters, the strong female leads that do that, whether it be Mariska Hargitay from Law and Order SVU, or whether it was I just watched the movie Angelina Jolie throwing some people and doing some martial arts. And so to me that's really cool when I see that on TV.
And then let's go back. Who is your favorite MMA on TV?
Well, I'm going to have to say Ronda Rousey is favorite MMA, and of course Kayla Harrison is favorite PFL, and they're both friends, and I love them tremendously.
That's fantastic. Do you have a martial artist, living or dead, in all of recorded history you'd like to train with the most?
I'd have to say my sensei, my mom. She was the best in the world to train with. I wrote an excerpt in a recent book that was Mothers and Daughters. And my chapter was, I threw my mother through the wall. Because it's a true story.
We're going to get to that one after. If everyone in the world could have the greatest benefit you've gotten from martial arts, whether they train or not, what benefit would that be?
The confidence of knowing where your body is. A lot of people in this world have no clue where any parts of their body are. And you just walk into a room and ask somebody, close their eyes, where's your left arm? People won't even be able to tell you.
Our last two questions come as a pair. Your greatest achievement and your greatest regret.
My greatest achievement, I don't think it can be quantified, because to me, the greatest achievement is all the people that I have given hope and help to, whether it be through my law enforcement career or my martial arts career or the legislative work that I've done to helping mental health for federal law enforcement. can't quantify that as my greatest. I can't quantify what it is, but that to me is my greatest achievement, because I've helped so many people, and I have no idea how many I've helped, but I just know it. Greatest regret? You know, I believe everything happens the way it's supposed to happen, but if I had just a little bit of hindsight, I was offered a partial scholarship, judo and softball, to go to Tokai University to train in Japan many, many, many years ago. And I kind of regret not training in Tokai, but I'm really happy the way life turned out anyway.
Thank you for your 10 questions. We really appreciate it. Talk about throwing your mother through a wall, please.
So I speak a lot of uchikomi, and uchikomi again is form practice, but with some vigor. You don't execute and complete the throw. However, you are executing the throw over and over. So we were doing a drill. I was training for the nationals or the US Open or some international tournament. And my mother was anchored by two hefty black belt men. So as she's being anchored by these two men, she told me to really try to execute the throw. I think it was actually osotogari, which is a rear reaping leg technique. So she was also teaching, and one of the senseis on the mat, I'm executing this. They didn't know. The gentleman thought that she said, okay, take a timeout because she was giving advice to another student. I didn't hear that. I was so focused. So they released her, and I came in on this technique with everything I had. They weren't holding her up, and we just went right through the wood paneling wall in the dojo. So we went through the wall. We've got plaster falling on us. She's laughing so hard, calling me Mama Trucker, let's just say, and through tears, laughing through tears. My father is the other sensei in the dojo, and he walks up to us with his wife full of white plaster, his daughter with wood sticking out of the back of her head. And instead of being the husband and father saying, oh, are you two okay? He just says with his very strong Japanese accent, well, now I must fix wall. And he walks away. We could not stop laughing. This was and the students didn't know what to do. And the two black belt guys that were supposed to anchor her, thought they were definitely in trouble. But it was probably one of the funniest things that ever happened in the dojo.
Right on. I just love when you're telling the story. You're like, yeah, I was just preparing for the Nationals or the US Open, or maybe it was one of the international tournaments. I mean, for some people, one of those alone would be so significant and something they would dine out on for life. And I love that you're not quite sure which or when. Sensei Suino, you've been doing, if I'm not mistaken, since 1968 judo. And what do you know of her mother?
Well, her mother casts a wide shadow over the world of judo, and has for years. I think everybody who spent time in judo knows Rusty Kanokogi. I don't know a ton about it, but I know the story. The story is a legend of the way the legend comes across in the world of judo that I inhabit is that she went out and competed as a man and tried to trick everybody. So it's a little nuance that you provided that I hadn't heard before. And soundly defeated the guy for the gold medal. So that part I had heard many times. I've seen her picture, on social media and other people's explanations about it. I'm a big fan of Fukuda Sensei, and I don't know if you know Frances Glaze Sensei in the Midwest here, but she's a big kata coach here and just a wonderful person who is also kind of an amazing woman in judo. So yeah, that's what I know. Your mother casts a big shadow, and as I said, I think everybody, at least of my generation, knows the name. And thank you, by the way, for adding to my knowledge of that.
Quick question for you before we get back to your sort of order of events, because these ideas are so compelling to me. From Kyoshi Adet Rice, who's one of the guests we've had on the show. Just a quick question is, do you consider yourself a female martial artist or a martial artist who's female? Do you think about that in any way? Is there something you can help young people with that?
A martial artist. I am a judoka. I am a martial artist. I happen to be female, right, but I am a martial artist. Just like, do martial artists say, hey, I'm a male martial artist? No, they're a martial artist. I'm a martial artist.
Appreciate that. Thank
Just
you.
like, and just to expound on that to the gentleman who has the 2 daughters, they're also martial artists.
Love that. So you're young, you're in the family. Tell us how you then end up competing on the national stage and how you end up in law enforcement.
Well, I stayed in the shadows for a very long time, and I heard everything that Rusty did to fight inequality. She took on the International Olympic Committee, sued them for discrimination, and subsequently got women's judo into the Olympics. She also took on a monumental task of hosting the first Women's World Judo Championships almost on a dare, because they said she couldn't do it because it was needed to go in and be an Olympic sport. So she mortgaged our home and rented Madison Square Garden and had the first Women's World Judo Championships, so that she could say, we had a World Championships and now we can be in the Olympics. So this is my role model. I also have role models that she teamed up with people from the Women's Sports Foundation, Billie Jean King, and all the other groundbreakers. Janet Guthrie, the race car driver, Lynn St. James, the race car driver. All of these female strong role models is what I grew up watching. I also watched her pull in her male allies, because men are just as important in supporting equality and women's sports. We don't give men enough credit, because we've got great girl dads out there and they're huge. So I watched this. How did I get into this judo career then? Well, with all of this, I'm one of the signers for the equality to sue and get equal rights to get us into the National Sports Festival. At that time, our dojo was competing and we were winning medals at the Empire State Games. And then my mom put me in the nationals and I started medaling in the nationals. And I became a national champion. I got enough points to be on the US team, where I was selected to go and compete internationally, whether it be the British Open, the German Open, the Fukuoka Cup, the Pacific Rim, the Pan Americans, whatever it was. I was fortunate enough to make the teams. There were tryouts and then there were points. I made the team and I medaled in many of them. So that's how my judo career really took off. It was tough because sometimes my mom would be a referee, because she was also an referee, an international referee. So I couldn't talk with her and she couldn't coach me. So she would come up with some hand signals or just walk by me and growl. And I think one of the toughest competitions, I competed at the National Collegiates. I was fighting for the gold medal at the National Collegiates. The head referee on my mat was my mother. Oh boy, I was tired, so I stepped out of bounds and I got a penalty. The way that penalty was delivered, I really, really, really thought that I should crawl in a corner and cry. She gave it to me with the most guttural growl and point that I ever received. I feel bad for my opponent because I just picked her up and smashed her to win that match, because I just wanted to get off the mat and away from my mom.
That's hilarious. Lance Armstrong talks about that. Like, half the reason he's such a good cyclist was he just went to bike to deal with his feelings about his mom. And there were so many feelings that he drove really fast and hard on that bike. I love you literally won a match because you were mad at your mom or scared of your mom.
True.
Yeah,
and then when I retired, I thought law enforcement would be a really great thing to get into, because I really liked helping people, and I just wanted to go and help people. I was big, I was strong, I was agile, I could fight, and I wanted to go and be a New York City police officer. So I went to John Jay, I enrolled, I went and took the police test. I did really, really well. But at the same time, I took the exam for US Customs, and I got called both on the same day. So I had to make a decision, and I asked my mom what to do, and she told me to go federal. And from there, my federal career just took off.
Incredible. Sensei, pardon me.
I was just going to say, and with these martial arts skills, it allowed me to be a control tactics and use of force instructor, and not the female instructor, but the instructor. And it was predominantly men I was teaching, a firearms instructor, an active shooter response instructor. So it really gave me the confidence to be able to do all of this, not only do it, but teach it as well.
Mm-hmm. Sensei Dauphin, I know you had a question come in.
Yeah, it's from Kaylee Data. I'm sorry if I pronounced that incorrectly, Kaylee. And everybody will laugh at this. So she says, "Hi, Dauphin Hunchy." I'm not a hunchy. I want to correct that right away. See, Sis Legacy's laughing right away. I'm not a hunchy. Just call me Randy or Sensei. So she says, "I want to thank Kanogi Sensei and her mom for being pioneers who made it possible for me to train in judo as a young girl in the 90s. This is a question for you, Sensei. If someone were to write a book about her, what would the name of her happiest chapters be?"
With my happiest chapters?
Her happiest chapters. If somebody were to write a book about you, what would the title of your happiest chapters be?
Some happiest chapters would be I got the bad guy off the street. I have protected public health. Happy chapter, I bridged the gap of mental health and law enforcement. And I got up and fought. Those would be some really happy chapters in my life, because those are all successful chapters. Nothing more rewarding than getting a bad guy off the street. And when I say bad guy, sometimes there are people that make poor choices and they get in trouble, but I'm talking really, really like the underbelly of society, the real bad guys that I'm able to get away from people in society. So those would really be happy chapters. And another happy chapter is I was able to restore faith and hope to a lot of people through the work that I did in law enforcement. On some of the cases that I worked, I was really able to make people whole again that were victimized.
Mm.
And Sensei Kanokogi, just so you know, Kaylee started judo at my dojo at a very young age. Her father was a judoka, and so I think in some ways she had a few similar experiences to yours. And now she's not active in judo anymore, but she does one of the most important people in her life. The gentleman that she cohabitates with is one of our rock star judo instructors at our dojo today.
That's fantastic. Well, Kaylee, thanks so much for the question, and congratulations on your long career studying judo. And even if you're not on the mat, it's still within you.
And honestly, I want to say I didn't recognize Kaylee's last name, but I do know that girl really well, and I know her partner. And Kaylee, I'm looking forward to a hug soon. Don't slam me onto the ground.
Well, Kaylee, here's a hug from me.
Sensei, talk to us about moving away from, strict law enforcement. You talked about it, to working towards empowerment. What does that look like for you today, and what does that mean?
Well, moving away from law enforcement and moving into empowerment, what I do is I do a lot of speaking about resilience. And I do a lot of speaking and a lot of training and a lot of teaching on skills of resilience, how to deal with the adversity when it happens. And it could be anybody from corporate to law enforcement or somewhere in the middle. Also by using some of these tools on finding purpose. A lot of people, they're so involved with such a fast moving society. I mean, before we even hit send, we're looking at the next thing and the next thing. How to slow it down a little bit and finding your purpose, finding your way. A lot of people are lost. They don't know where their way is. A lot of people are lost. They don't know who they are any longer. And I help people examine who they are, what they're about, what's their substance. And I give people tools on how to do their best. In Japanese, we tell people, ganbate, do your best, or ganbate kudasai, do your best, please. What is your best? What makes you your best? And I help explore that. So when I'm doing public speaking, when I'm doing empowerment speaking, I will talk about what are your strengths, what are things that are not your strengths, but we can improve on, and really give examples on how to persevere. So everything that I talk about, people can kind of cherry pick what fits in their toolbox and use throughout life, not just at the moment. Unfortunately, a lot of speakers talk about things that can be used, but only if every other parameter is set. If we're in a utopia, I keep it relatable. I keep it real and let people know this is you. This is who you are. Someday you're going to have good days, and some days you're going to have fantastic days. And some days it's just going to be a great day if you can get out of bed and get onto the couch. And that's okay. All right. We're not superheroes, but we are superhumans. As a superhuman, we are human, and that's the thing. Human beings aren't designed to be at a pace that we keep pushing ourselves, because we're competing against AI, we're competing against machines. Take a minute for yourself, take a breath, take a beat, give yourself the grace to regroup and figure out who you are, what you want, and how you can be empowered doing that.
I love it. So, this isn't about me, but I've literally been having conversations and posted on my TikTok channel today about finding your purpose. And I'd love to chat with you more about this. But what I do want to do with this is actually go around the horn. And I want to start with you, Sensei Kanokogi. What do you think is, if you had to help people listening right now, what is most people's greatest barrier to finding their purpose?
Anxiety and fear. The greatest barrier is fear of failure. So what was it? Was it Shakespeare that said, proceed as if failure was not an option, or something of that sort? Or no, it's neither good or bad. It's what the mind makes it. And then I'm going to take it a step further. Proceed as if failure is not an option. Remove that barrier of fear. And exactly what are you afraid of? Are you afraid of failure? Are you afraid of what's ahead? Or are you afraid to walk through wherever you have to walk through because there's a plethora of spiders waiting there? If that's the case, then your fear's legit. I'm calling Uber. I'm out of there. But in general, what is your fear? What's holding you back? If it's failure, if you're afraid that somebody's going to judge you, open your box of I don't cares and pull one of them out and throw it at them. Okay? Don't care what somebody else is thinking. Care about what you're thinking. And a lot of times, if you do proceed as if failure was not an option, then you will proceed. You will be successful. And if you take your failures and step them up as stepping blocks, then all of a sudden, look how high up you are on the podium. You're building off of those failures and you're learning. And, think about this. Michael Jordan, he did not make his high school basketball team on the first cut. Mm-hmm. So what's your mindset? Is it a growth mindset or not? If it's a growth mindset, then yes, you will keep going. But if it's a fixed mindset, then you know what? You're throwing in the towel and you're giving up. Open your mindset. Go with that growth mindset and keep trying. There's so many different ways to accomplish what you want to accomplish.
Mm-hmm. Let's go to you next, Sensei Suino. And, it's up to you if you want to talk about this in terms of teaching students or just life in general. But what would you say to be helpful is most people's conscious or unconscious barrier to finding their purpose or their best self?
I certainly agree that fear is one of the biggest barriers. What I've seen over and over again when I try to help people become greater than they are, or something that they want to be that they aren't yet, it is often the result of their past. It's hard for people to shake off the effects of their childhood. We come from imperfect backgrounds. Often our parents or our environments aren't great. And I guess that creates the fear that we live with. But it also creates sometimes the inability to realize that there's a better future, that there's a better version of yourself, or that it's even possible to live into that. And that's where empowerment comes in. That's where groups that help, self-help gurus come in. That's certainly where the events that I teach come in, to inspire people to break through that stuff. Having said that, it's not always easy. And it does manifest as fear, but sometimes it manifests as just not knowing that there's something else you can do.
Thanks, Sensei. I just want to chip in real quick and say that for me, I think so much of it has to do with waiting to be told the right way to do it. Because we grow up with what you call those imperfect parents, but they're still telling us what to do, or schools. And that's not a bad thing when you're a kid. But if you're trying to find your own authentic purpose, no one can quite give me the roadmap. But a lot of times we're waiting for someone to tell us the right way to be ourselves. And that's a paradox and an impossibility. Sensei Dauphin, what do you think is the greatest barrier that people have, conscious or unconscious, to becoming who they might want to be?
I think it's fear. I agree with that. And I think it's fear of two things: fear of being hurt and fear of being embarrassed. Right? And one's ego and the other is your preservation. Right? So I think if you're afraid to be hurt, damaged, you can overcome that. Your ego is something that you need to challenge yourself with, right? Like, and just Sensei Suino said this a lot, right? Like, if you want to be great at something, you need to first be willing to be awful at it. So first you got to be awful at something and just put your ego in your pocket, and then you have the potential to be great. But I think fear dictates both of those things.
Thanks, Sensei. Hanshi Legacy, what do you think is the greatest barrier people have to becoming, authentically their best selves or find their purpose?
Everybody's born with three natural things. That's breathing, eating, and reproduction. Everything else you have to overcome laziness to achieve. So I think it's the first step in overcoming laziness. That's just a guess.
Thanks, Hanshi. Sensei Suino, we had a question come in, and I think you might want to ask this one. Might be coming from within the house. I don't know. The caller's in the house.
I'm not in the house, but my lovely bride follows me everywhere. And in this case, she's on the call, one of our audience, and she wants to know, Sensei Kanokogi, if you teach judo seminars.
I'm not scheduled to teach any yet. However, I was just contacted to do something for the National Girls and Women's Sports Day. I've been doing more speaking than physical teaching, although I do have a dojo down in my basement. So the answer right now is no, not yet, but there's the possibility.
Well, I think we would like to stay in touch about that. We have a great cadre of women judo players at our dojo. And if it turned out that you'd be interested in doing something like that, I'm sure they would be ecstatic.
Absolutely. Yeah, let's talk offline.
Speaking of talking offline, we're at what we call Around the Horn. So the way we like to do this is after I say a quick thanks, we go around the horn and we talk a little bit about our time with you, Sensei. And then the last word will entirely go to you, and you can kind of go out on anything you want to in terms of, what you want to address or what you think a nice take-home message would be for everybody. But until then, I just want to say thanks to the people who run the show behind the scenes for us. I want to say thanks to Robert Slumsky, to Andrei Sedishev, to Justin Shea, to Alden Adair, to Jesse Blay-Vitao, Sydney Dauphin, Josh Kitchens, Christiana Landol, Daniel J. Holland, Drita Gugliani, and Stavros Stavroulias. They run things behind the scene. We have Andre tonight, and Robert set us up. We do not have a show without them. You wouldn't know about our show without them. They are the elves making Santa's gift. Santa gets the glory. The elves are doing the work. So we just want to say thanks for that. And I just want to throw it to you, Hanshi Legacy, to talk about our time tonight and what you want to say.
It was really good to hear your story. Unfortunately, I had never heard about your famous family. And I'm glad that I finally have heard it. And hope to meet you sometime, and maybe when you come to Michigan. Thank you very much for being on our podcast.
Thank you so much, Hanshi. Sensei Suino, what do you want to say about our time this evening?
Man, I don't or normally take a ton of notes, but I did this time, and if I read them all, then Randy won't have anything to do because he always takes a ton of notes and makes comments. Gosh, I love that. This was a real different this had a real different texture than a lot of our calls. Starting right away from Kumamoto Castle, talking about Bushido and Wabi Sabi, as a Japanophile and somebody that lived there for a number of years. I like getting into that stuff. And as I said, it was really cool to hear some more nuance around your mother's history, to hear the real deal instead of what was going around the watering holes. Just great call. I'd love to talk to you more, and definitely would love to at least explore the possibility of a training session together sometime.
Thank you, Sensei Suino. Sensei Dauphin?
Man, so much good stuff here, right? Off the hop, samurai lineage. We all actually have that, just maybe not blood, but we all have that samurai lineage. We will all claim it, whether it is accepted or not. We will all claim the samurai lineage. You said off the hop, don't let other people influence your mind. I've been struggling with that all night tonight, but that was a good thing for me to hear. Don't let other people influence your mind. You lived your life with the Kota Bushido. You were born on the mats. Your mom's water broke on the mat. Like, that's not everybody can claim that, right? Your mom and my mom should have met each other. Like, they would have been really good friends. And I'm just going to leave it at that. Another person, YMCA, was brought up on the show once again. The YMCA. I think the YMCA might be the best thing that ever happened for martial arts in North America. Could potentially, like, go through our records and you'll hear more than 100 people talk about the YMCA. Get Up and Fight. I love the name of that book. Like, just get up and fight, right? Like, today, tomorrow, the next hour, wherever, get up and fight. That name, Rusty, it's gonna, if you watch this, think of it different, right? You said, I'm a girl, but never accept that. I really would like to connect you with my daughters, Cheyenne and Sydney. Like, the three of you over coffee would have amazing conversations, and we could all listen and grow from it. Your 10 questions, most effective movement. Everybody should think about that. Most influential person, your mom, me too. Most influential of all time, Kano Sensei. Most people would agree with you. Yeah. Putting your mom through the wall. That's great. I never did that to my mom. She did it to me a couple of times, but yeah. Yeah. I'm a judoka, right? I'm a martial artist, not a woman martial artist, not just, you made it really clear. I'm a judoka and I'm a martial artist. Love that. Thank you for everything you've done with law enforcement. Like, thank you so much for doing all of that. I know you were in New York City for 9/11, and yeah, thank you so much for what you did on that day and all the days. The chapters you talked about, bridging the gap. I got up and fought. I was able to restore hope and faith, right? And then one thing you said that I needed to hear tonight was take a minute for yourself, right? Just take a minute for yourself. I needed that tonight. Like, so when you said that, thank you for saying that, because I needed it today. I need to take a minute for myself. So thank you, Sensei.
Thanks, Sensei Dauphin. I just want to say, I get to guide so much throughout the chat, but just that wabi-sabi, that ikigai, those are concepts that I'm just walking through the door of, and they're important. And the idea that you brought them up so early on, it just, it made me feel like I was meant to hear this today, even if I was just listening and not hosting. You know, it's okay not to be okay. You said that a number of times, and I wish I'd heard that a lot earlier in my life, because I sort of hurt myself through a perfectionism, and I didn't realize that that's actually just a version of self-flagellation and self-subjugation. And you know, I didn't know it was okay not to be okay. I wasn't taught that by my parents, and that's okay. They were great at many other things, but I'm so glad some people will get to hear that because of you, younger than I did. And I really like the way you talked about bad people. Like, I think we sometimes forget how there, like you said, there's people who make mistakes and there's bad people. And there is a very big distinguishing line. And it was really nice to hear you talk about your pride. And I think it's a valid pride, not a, you know, biblically negative pride at getting people off the streets who are bad people. And if we don't admit there are bad people, what are we doing martial arts for? And it was a real nice reminder when you said it that way. Ladies and gentlemen, next week we have our host chat, so we hope you all tune in for that. But for now, we're going to give the last word to our guest, Sensei and Dr. Jean Kanokogi.
Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you for all your feedback. This is fantastic. I want to say thank you to everybody behind the scenes making this show possible, and for inviting me and having the patience for my schedule and to accommodate it. And thank you all of you guys, again, our allies, you know, men and women, martial arts. That's who we are. We're just martial artists. Thank you so much for everything that you contributed, and making yourself a little vulnerable tonight to be open and receptive to some of the things that I have said, such as it's okay to not be okay. Talk about smashing the stigma. A couple of things, and one thing, giving yourself permission. Sometimes you have to give yourself permission to take a break, to take a minute for yourself. And also remember, there's a lot of people out there that will should all over you. And you will should all over yourself. I should this, I should that, you should this, you should that. Stop letting people should all over you. Stop shoulding all over yourself. Yes, it's should that I said, in case anybody mixes up my Brooklyn accent here. So one of the takeaways I'd like you to do is, as a martial artist in the Bushido Code, as a human being, take every moment that you can at least once a day and do a random act of kindness for somebody. It doesn't have to be grand. Just hold the door open for somebody, smile, and say hello. Do something random. If there's a piece of garbage on the floor, don't walk over it, pick it up and throw it out. Somebody might not see you do it. You don't need that recognition. You have self-recognition. And one last takeaway, no matter what life throws at you, always get up and fight.
Thank you so much. Thank you, senseis. Thank you, everybody, for watching. We'll see you next week. Have a beautiful night.
Thanks, Sensei. Thanks, everybody.